All right, so me and Jack did the Center for Victims of Torture. This is their logo up there and their mission statements here. The mission of the Center for Victims of Torture is to heal the wounds of torture on individuals, their families, and their communities, and to end torture worldwide.
All right. The origin and history of the Center for Victims of Torture. The organization started in search of answering a simple question from the governor of Minnesota, Rudy Parrich's daughter. What are you doing for human rights? Rudy took that question to a whole new level by directing a whole committee to research different actions they can take to help human rights. The committee then came up with a rehabilitation center to aid survivors of torture back to their normal lives. In 1985, this rehabilitation center grew to become what is now known as the nonprofit organization, the Center of Victims of Torture.
All right, so they work in the United States, Africa, and one in the Middle East. They have two stations in Minnesota because that is where they were based out of. They have one in DC, they have one in Georgia. And internationally, they have one in Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, and Jordan.
All right, what does the Center for Victims of Torture do? The Center for Victims of Torture directs their focus on four main steps: healing, training, research, and advocacy. Healing. The victims are welcomed to one of the several CVT locations. At these locations, survivors are aided by a team of professionals that provide whatever treatment is effective in the recovery of the victims, including medical and nursing care, psychotherapy, social services, and massages and physical therapy. Training. CVT finds ways to support and train people and organizations that work with survivors of torture. Around the world, the CVT offers training programs that teach these people and organizations new and improved ways to provide healing services to torture victims. Research. The for Victims of Torture works with other rehabilitation centers, helping them develop ways of finding what services and are most beneficial in the rehabilitation of torture survivors. The CVT also conducts rigorous evaluation and monitoring to ensure that the work they do is effective. Advocacy. One of the biggest issues when it comes to torture is that it is not talked about enough. The CVT office in Washington, D.C. gives survivors of torture that were previously silenced by their perpetrators a voice. They are given the opportunity to let the people know the terrible things that happen to refugees. The CVT strives to let torture survivors live a safe, productive life. Where your money goes. Now, the CVT has approximately $21 million in revenue. That was in 2019. Money used to go towards the organization's helping people is $17 million which is about 80% of their revenue. Money used to pay workers, meetings, and other administrative positions is $3.5 million, which is about 13% of their revenue. Money that goes towards fundraising is about $1.5 million, which is about 8% of their revenue. Building more, something that they want to do is build more centers in foreign countries in the upcoming years. In 2019, Curtis Gearing made $209,314, which is a little bit under 1% of the revenue of the nonprofit organization that year. Charity Navigator, this foundation received an 84.47 out of 100 with a 3 out of 4 star review, which is not bad.
So then we found a story of a survivor on their websites named Noor. Noor lived in war-bitten Syria and woke up and fell asleep to the sounds of gunshot and tanks every night, which was pretty normal for her at the time. Once the war started getting closer to her home, she was restless all night, taking care of her two babies at 16 years old while her young husband was fighting in the war. Getting out of Syria was hard, with the checkpoints and snipers on every rooftop within 20 miles, but she eventually did that and lived with her sister in Jordan. Although she was out of the war zone, her family was still locked in Syria. Her brothers, 13 and 14 years old, tried to make a daring escape, but then they were stopped by patrol, and one was beaten so badly that they never talked again, and the other one was taken. Her mother and father then went searching for them, and all they got told was that he was beat to death at every station they went to. Later that night, the people that dropped a bomb on her mother and father's house, they did not live, but her brother did. It was at this moment that Nora lost the will to live. The CVT then found Nora in Jordan and nursed her back from depression and anger, which took a lot. They even got her to tell her story, which was a big step in the recovery process. Nora may never get the justice that her and her family deserves, but without the CVT, Nora would not be able to tell the story. We also have a YouTube video here. It's not viral or anything, but it was the only one we could find, so.
Around the world, the refugee crisis is growing every day. The number of women and children who are refugees is shocking, nearly half. And the number of refugees who have survived torture is staggering. CVT, the Center for Victims of Torture, estimates that in the United States alone, nearly half of refugees are survivors of torture. That's up to 1.3 million people. Many of these individuals and their families are in desperate need of rehabilitative care. Many suffer from PTSD and other severe mental health conditions, in addition to the painful physical symptoms of their torture. CVT is the recognized expert in highly specialized care, counseling, social work, physical therapy, and more. To reach millions of people in need, CVT is growing at an unprecedented rate. CVT has doubled its size in the last 4 years. In 2016, we rebuilt the lives and restored the hope of well over 23,000 survivors and family members across the globe. We see survivors in 3 continents. We're continuing to grow where the need is most dire: Africa and in the Middle East. To reach as many people as possible, we need your help. Partner with CVT today and be part of the future of global healing. The world needs your leadership now.